because we are streaming once again and we talk about front-end development and accessibility. And today we have with us Florian, who will pronounce his name in English fully the way he likes it in a moment, I guess. I know how to pronounce it in Dutch, but that doesn't help all of you. My name is Eric, Erik Kroes in Dutch. And why do I talk about accessibility? Well, I think I have something to tell about accessibility, as I've worked as an accessibility specialist for a few years now. And since a few weeks, I'm also a product owner of a design systems team. And besides that, I've done some freelance accessibility work. Think of audits, workshops, whatever is needed to improve accessibility around the world, I guess. That's what I do. Yeah, what else? Last year I started streaming because I think it's nice for accessibility to have a platform, to have a spot to share knowledge, because I think the community of accessibility people is a rather nice one. And there is a lot of knowledge in the community, but knowledge that stays with people is not as valuable as knowledge that can be shared. So that's why I started streaming. And today, as I said, with us Florian, I hope to share some knowledge. What can you tell us about yourself, Florian?
My name is Florian Beijers in Dutch. Usually Americans call me Florian or Florian Beijers or Beijers. I'm not fussed about how my name's pronounced. As long as I know you're me, I'm good. Really. I'm a fully blind 28-year-old developer from the Netherlands as well, from Arnhem. So I'm a programmer without any kind of visual acuity whatsoever. I use a Braille display and screen reader to do my job. Next to that, I have a lot of, I guess, I could call them side hustles. I do accessibility consulting as well. I'll do the occasional audio editing job. I work as a teacher. I teach mostly people in my situation, people with screen reader, how to do programming. I've taught some languages in the past. Linguistics is a big one as well. Yeah, pretty well-filled plate, as it were.
Yeah, well, I get immediately, I get curious about teaching. What do you teach people? Can you repeat? And I'll try to make not too much noise. I dropped something here, but let's ignore that.
I'll teach you not to drop your existence.
Let's start with that.
I tend to teach people who are blind, people who use the screen reader, how to best make use of the tools that they have in order to do various activities around coding. That could be reviewing pull requests, just coding in general, getting started with it, like finding new tools, getting started on that, making sure you know what to use, what not to use, what mentality to embrace to get that working.
So they are people that have experience with using a screen reader, maybe?
Yeah, generally they know how to use a screen because that's what they use to access the computer, but they don't know how to get started coding. There's a distinct lack of resources that target this particular audience group, and
this is gonna hurt you. I'm sorry. You already said you're into audio, and I'm getting in my chat that you have a harsh echo.
I do. My room is completely untreated. It's a pretty empty room, so there's a pretty harsh echo in my room. This is true. There's not much I can do about it except for close mic, and if I'm going to do that, I'm going to be right in your grill with the camera. So I'm not doing that. I don't think anyone wants to see me up that close.
Yeah.
So
I'm getting even double voice.
Make a bit of an improvement. There we go. This should be a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think I changed something as well.
Okay. Oh dear, did you have the double problem? Well.
Oh, perfect. It's perfect. Yeah, I guess I should start every stream with just asking people, like, how do we sound? Can you hear us?
Yeah.
How many people are we? But this is good. So that's good.
I'll just have to look off to the side a bit to talk into the mic properly, but that's just sacrifices we have to make.
I think if you rotate your head, we're still fine, because I can up some levels or something if you like.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, this is fine. This is fine, really. Okay, so you teach people that already use a screen reader, so they know some basics, hopefully, but then they start coding, and what do they encounter?
A lot of problems, mostly with the where do I start? Like, a lot of people are looking for a so-called accessible tutorial for coding, which just doesn't exist and doesn't need to exist, really, because a lot of the time you can get by with just using mainstream stuff. You just need a little bit of translational skill from, say, someone says click the blue button to being able to figure out that that means that that's your run option in your options menu.
Yeah, so it's more about people skills than software skills, I guess.
Interpretation skills,
Yeah.
knowing what you're reading and what you're supposed to be doing, finding like creativity, finding new ways to do things that seem to be tricky at first. Use the command line, use add-ons for your screen reader, things like that.
And is like one development environment easier than the other, or?
Yes, there are various development environments that don't work at all. For example, Android Studio for a long time didn't used to work very well. It's getting better, but it's still not pleasant, in my opinion.
Because
Delphi,
that's based on IntelliJ, right?
Yep, and IntelliJ, I'll just not even start.
It's comparable, okay.
Yeah, it's essentially IntelliJ is the beginning, and then Android Studio is a little bit better. And I think some of the fixes from Android Studio have been pushed upstream to IntelliJ. So it's getting better, just at a very slow pace.
Yeah,
people can say they can work with it now. I myself have been involved with the Visual Studio Code editor for a few years to get that as accessible as it can be, and we're pretty far along now. It's actually quite usable, and I use it as a daily driver for most of my projects.
It's kind of funny because I tend to hear every now and then, yeah, Macs are easier for screen readers, and you're better off with iOS when you have a screen reader. But that's all about the user experience. But I guess on the development side, the story is even stronger because
not even well, iOS, you can only really build iOS apps on the Mac, so yeah, there is that. You can definitely code on Windows. You can code in Swift on Windows on Visual Studio Code. You're still gonna have to use a Mac to actually build your assets. So it's up to you if you want to do that from Windows or do it on a Mac.
Yeah.
Xcode has gotten some accessibility love lately. They have gotten better, especially the fact that Apple's losing Interface Builder in favor of Swift UI, which is a code first way of building UIs, is a big step forward to making Xcode a lot more usable. It used to be a nightmare. There's a guide on applevis.com that explains how you can make essentially what you need to do to get one control to appear on your screen and be codable, so you can hook up a function to it, and it's like a 25-step process for every control.
Which sounds like some basic thing that you have to do like many times a day.
Probably, yeah. If you have like a lot of controls, you pretty much have to do it over and over, because you have to first drag a control onto your canvas, then you have to link up an outlet to it. It can certainly be done quickly if you get like the Fingerspitzengefühl, the muscle memory down.
Yeah.
To do it quickly, but it's just so incredibly involved that it just made a lot of people very frustrated.
So as long as you adapt to the software, then it's okay. And that's not the way it should be.
That's a bit how like OS X in general works, screen reader wise, in my opinion. You don't really have a lot of tools to adapt the screen reader to your needs. You have to adapt your needs to the screen reader. And that's why I don't use a Mac all that much. They are also getting better slowly. There's also third-party projects like VOCR that adds features to VoiceOver that weren't there before. But yeah, overall, it's a bit of a sad state that we still, after like, how long is, I think VoiceOver has existed for like at least 10 years now, if not more.
Yeah.
And it's still just not at the level where it could be. And if you look at what Microsoft's doing with Narrator, they're also not there yet, but they've been working on it for a couple of years. And it's, in a lot of sense, they have surpassed VoiceOver in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and if you would draw a graph, then at least they are building, right? Then it's better than standing still.
They're also way more public about what they're doing accessibility-wise. Usually, if I look at like Windows Insider build version new blog posts, the accessibility team will retweet with the accessibility changes in the tweet. There will be accessibility changes listed on the page. It's very apparent that it's being worked on, whereas VoiceOver is like sometimes it's in the change notes, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, more like a footnote.
There's a team over at AppleVis where people try, hey, is there new options? Did things change? Did bugs get introduced?
Yeah.
So and it's like...
It's like developers say like Safari is like the new like the new Internet Explorer.
New IE, yeah.
Yeah. And then the screen reader that's attached to it is, that's even worse.
The new Supernova, I guess.
Well, it's your words, right? Like, yeah.
I grew up with Dolphin Hull at the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore, but that used to be what Supernova was without the magnification. And that's what I grew up with using when I was like 10, 11. That's what the healthcare providers here pushed. So I didn't even know JAWS and NVDA existed until I was like 15, 16-ish.
Yeah, do people from other countries even know Supernova? I mean, it's like a starting point for many people in the Netherlands, but
the UK will. The UK will. I know a lot of people in the UK who still use it even. But apart from that, I don't know.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but Supernova used to be the client or the screen reader software that was subsidized by your healthcare provider, right?
Yeah, they would really push the Supernova and whatever Optilex Braille display was at the time. It's been the Voyager for a while. Then they turned to the Alpha BC640.
Yeah.
And
it's not
I think
cheap,
they've let up on that a little. Yeah, I think they've let up on that a little bit. I don't know. Like Babbage has moved into that space a lot, and they do a lot of NVDA stuff. They do a lot of like Handytech Braille displays. I'm not quite sure how it is for like young children nowadays. Obviously, I'm not a young child anymore. I'm not a parent either, so I don't know how that works. But I think we have shifted a little bit in that regard.
Yeah, I find it so interesting because people tend to sketch this image like, yeah, you can pick any screen reader, any software you like, but the reality is if one gets subsidized and the other doesn't, then you get a standard. And I think in the Netherlands, that's often the case. So global numbers don't count.
It's really just like if one screen reader gets subsidized and the other one doesn't, then people who get into this space just don't know about the other screen reader.
Yeah, and it's not
well,
cheap.
They didn't used to be like, when this was happening and it was the early 2000s. You didn't really Google all that much yet at the time, so you can now find all this stuff on the internet. If you could do a quick Google on screen readers, you'll find that Supernova is kind of not really a thing anymore. But back in the day, this was what your healthcare provider was telling you. This is what the company that they were recruiting to get you your stuff was telling you. So that was probably the right thing to do. And then that's what you get.
Yeah, I've got in the chat now a message from Mallory. Basically, yeah, is it a counterpoint or an echo? I guess a bit of both. That JAWS was pushed by all blindness organizations and schools for decades in the US. And that's basically the same thing. That's good salesmanship, I guess.
I guess, yeah. It's been a lot more prolific than Window Eyes has ever been in my experience. Like JAWS and Window Eyes, when I got my first Braille display, were things I knew of because I read my Braille display manual from cover to cover, mostly because I was interested in what it did. And it mentioned that I could use it with JAWS and with Window Eyes, which were like programs that I'd never heard of before. But I'm like, okay, I guess that's a thing that exists.
Sounds
good. Not sure why I've never. Yeah.
yeah. Cool. So you develop on a Windows machine?
Yeah, generally I do. I do have a Mac Mini that I use for Mac builds. I'm currently working on a cross-platform application. But most of my development work, like 95% of my development work, is on Windows. Yeah.
And what IDE do you use?
VS Code.
Yeah.
Most of the time. Yeah. VS Code with WSL2. So I have a Windows subsystem for Linux Bash shell that I run Windows of like Linux software in.
Yeah. And so for the people that don't know it, that's actually what the abbreviation is for, Windows Subsystem for Linux. It's like running Linux in your Windows system, and there are some caveats. I always doubt if I say that word right, but I think it's caveats. Caveats. I don't know. No, caveats, right? Caveats. Yeah. There are some pointers. Like not everything works, which is mostly the visual stuff, by the way. But
mostly
it's
GUIs don't work currently. They're working on that, especially in WSL2, which is like more of a VM than they were first going for.
Yeah, and I would love to use my video card for like machine learning and stuff, but that's a bit complicated.
Yeah. Cybersecurity for me, like hash cracking and things like that.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
It's still being worked on.
But still, it's so close to running Linux on Windows. It's a luxury.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And what makes it so powerful in combination with VS Code is that VS Code has a remote extension for WSL distribution. So you can just have your code running in the WSL shell and tell VS Code, hey, there's this project in WSL that I want you to interface with. And then you can have all your linters, all your tools running on Linux where they belong, essentially. So they work a lot better that way. You don't have to like jump through hoops to get it all to work on Windows.
And do you have like a preferred screen reader that you use the most?
NVDA about 99% of the time.
Okay. And I guess then that you're a Chrome user?
Yeah, for the most part. I use Chrome and Microsoft Edge. Really don't need to do that, actually. I use Chrome for because my muscle memory is just used to do Windows or Chrome. But my default browser is actually Microsoft Edge. So if I open a link from anywhere, it goes to Microsoft Edge, which is what it really means is that my Chrome is my browser where I do my random, I need to check something out real quick, and my MS Edge is more my, I need to read this long article at some point, and it's just going to hang out there until I get to it.
Yeah. Open tabs, that's a problem for everyone. So that's...
Oh, yes.
I'm going to read this one day.
Last time I checked, I have like 55 tabs open in my MS Edge alone, and it's not even looking at my Chrome. So
I've often seen on my phone, they actually count to 99, and when you're beyond 99, they just show a smiley because they don't know.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, and I can tell you from experience that happens.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got like Visual Studio Code, Windows Subsystem for Linux, and then mostly NVDA with Chrome. And are you ever forced to use another browser, or would you like to use another browser?
Not really. Like a lot of it's Chrome engine based right now, so like web accessibility wise, it really doesn't matter all that much. Sometimes I switch to Firefox because weirdly, things sometimes just work better.
My experience is the other way around.
And sometimes it's the other way around. It really depends. Sometimes if I can't click something on Chrome, the first thing I'll try is to go look at it in Firefox. And then if that doesn't work either, I'll usually have to go look at the code to see what's happening. Maybe add some role attribute to make it work or behave. It's just sad, but yeah, sometimes you have to do that.
And have you always, well, at least since you used Supernova, have you been using NVDA?
No, here in the Netherlands, there was this big this big virus that went around for screen readers that literally knocked out nothing else but screen readers. So it would knock out the big three. It would knock out Window Eyes, it would knock out Supernova, and it would knock out JAWS.
So basically an ableist virus?
Essentially, yeah. Like I think actually a blind person wrote it as a joke, and then just proliferated through the community somehow, and everyone got it because this is the time of no firewalls and modems directly connected to the internet, so it was very easy to infect people with it. Just like send out a random infected executable and off you went, essentially.
Yeah, and nobody notices, right? Because nobody will notice that it knocks out the screen reader. I mean,
no, it just like you could see you could see Supernova starting up and then would just vanish. So it was just like being killed from Task Manager, probably. What was hilarious though is that NVDA wasn't affected by this. I think they just forgot or they didn't know it existed at the time.
It's a marketing campaign, knock out the competition.
Yeah, NVDA did it. Yeah, so that was hilarious. At the time, I used JAWS a lot because I liked it was a lot faster than Supernova was at the time already. I liked Supernova's Braille better. So what I did was I had actually 2 screen readers running at the time, and I would use Braille from Supernova and I would use speech from JAWS, which worked for the most part, but sometimes broke.
Sounds like hell. I mean,
when that virus hit everything, I just switched over to NVDA and it worked reasonably well. I didn't do much with my computer at the time. I gamed mostly, and that worked with NVDA. So, okay.
you were happy with the way it worked. Yeah,
I was happy with what it worked, and like over the years, I sort of swapped between JAWS and NVDA. And as NVDA got more powerful, I think around my college days, when I started my college days, it was pretty much NVDA all the way. I still do have JAWS for the like once in a lifetime thing I need to use it, but apart from that,
you never know, right?
Never really need it anymore.
That's the that could be like a digital hoarder motto or something, like you never know when you might need this piece of software. Yeah.
Might need this particular version of this particular application sometime.
You never know. I'd rather buy another hard disk.
The thing that happened last year where they killed the repo, and then I was like, I'll just grab the executable before they take that down too.
Yeah, just to make sure. Yeah. So have you been coding for a long time then?
Off and on pretty long, yeah. I started when I was 11. I went away, like I graduated, I put that between air quotes, from blind school when I was like 10, and I switched over to a mainstream education. And when I did that, a couple months after that happened, I found a website by a former classmate who wrote a HTML tutorial, like how do you make links, how do you make headings, and that idea of just writing some arcane symbols in a file and have it come to life in front of you, that never really left me. So that's how my coding journey started. And then afterwards, I got my hands on some C++ books. I ran away screaming because it's way too hard. And I switched over to Python and C#. And after that point, I just sort of just kept up with it. And I'm still here.
And of course, that first tutorial, as it was written by a former classmate, I guess it was accessible, right?
It was just text. Yeah. It was just a bunch of text. And this was, when was this? it must have been 2000, 2001. So, 2002 it must have been. So, geocities.com was a huge thing, and
Yeah.
Lycos was a thing. So you could just have a big blank canvas, start typing, and press the submit button, and it's just gonna get published somewhere.
Yeah. See if it
What
works.
even is CSS? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good start. And then it basically became worse. You rolled into programming and kept doing it.
Overall, yeah.
And now you are like a lead programmer.
I'm a lead developer for a what's called a MUD, a multi-user domain. It's essentially a text-based game over the wire. For people who are old enough for this to remember this, it's kind of like the old BBS games where you had you typed a command and you get a thing back, and you type another command, you get another thing back, but online and with multiple people at once.
Yeah, I've always learned it as a multi-user dungeon. So
dungeon, domain, dimension, people change it around depending on what the theme of the thing is.
Whether dungeon is applicable or not. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's not even, if it's a sci-fi thing, it's not really a dungeon. But then there's even sub sets of MUDs, like there's MUSH, which stands for multi-user shared hallucination.
Yeah.
And there's MU, multi-user object-oriented. So there's a bunch of ones that have slightly different abbreviations, and if you look around hard enough, you'll find a bunch of different things that do different things.
And you work as a developer on one.
Yeah, I work as a coder on one of them currently.
Which is
fun. It's
like a perfect fit because there's almost no visual element. I mean,
there is. I was about to say that it's a very short feedback loop as well, because when you build a feature, you essentially get feedback from the players almost instantly. Hey, this doesn't work. Okay, I'll fix it. And then there's no I don't have to worry about if my links are in the right color, or if my CSS didn't break down. I can just
nobody
look
cares.
at the code and deterministically determine. That's redundant, but anyway, that what I'm doing worked and it's supposed to work. And if it doesn't work, I can see why. If CSS doesn't work, I'll be well, I am now in the camp of pretty much everyone else when CSS doesn't work. Why doesn't this work?
Yeah, and you feel like a normal person because it happens to everybody.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, I still do have my code is working and I don't know why moments in this game, but that's also normal.
That's part of coding. Yeah, that's
just what you get.
Yeah, and is there a difference between clients as well? Because to sketch an image for the people that don't know it, you need to have a client, and it's logging into a DOS prompt or something, or your command prompt, because you actually connect to a server, usually through Telnet.
You can literally do it over Telnet. You can literally fire up a Telnet shell and go to the MUD address, and you'll get a very rudimentary MUD experience. It'll work, not very well, but it will work.
No macros or luxury stuff, but it works.
Right. I did this when I was still on Windows 98. I would use Telnet to audit MUDs to see if I actually wanted to be non-lazy and copy paste the things into my MUD client, because at the time you could just click a Telnet link from a browser and just open a shell, and you could just test it without having to do it.
It's a protocol just like HTTP, so the links worked. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. Not anymore. You can't do that anymore these days. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And no, not really. No, they are working. They have a web-based client that they created. It's called Nexus. And what they want to do with that is essentially give people who don't have a client just an instant way to get what I was essentially doing, just to click play, and you can just start playing from your browser. And what is funny is that takes us right back to accessibility, because that thing currently isn't very accessible. And as of today, I've been given the chance and the opportunity to make it accessible. So that's fun.
Okay.
It's going to be something I'm going to do next to my MUD coding duties.
Is it open source or is it free?
No, it's not. It's the MUD is technically free. They do have paid perks and things. Not really a pay to win kind of idea.
Yeah, but the client, is it Nexus?
No, the client is free. You can just click it and you can go. It's just there's a play link on the MUD's website, and then when you click it, you just go into the client and you start playing.
And is the client open source as well? If I would check it out next week, would I be able to change something?
Tis not. Sadly, it's a thing that they make on their own. Yeah, the whole game is also not open source. They do work on version control, which is not always the case for MUD coders. I've seen people do the old FTP dance.
Yeah, just put it up there and see how it works. Yeah,
just worked on my machine syndrome. That's not a thing. So just copy paste what I just did into the actual game and see what it does.
Yeah, you didn't start out with GeoCities for nothing. I mean, it just sticks around, right?
Right. Essentially, yeah. Just cowboy coding all over the place. Yeah, why not?
But it sounds like an interesting challenge to make a client that's accessible. Like I try to contribute to open source every now and then and use this stream as well to audit stuff. But it's nice when you cannot just see what's wrong like in your browser, but actually fix it and improve it.
Yeah, that's when I do when I audition for accessibility audits for companies. When I see open positions, open contracts, what I tend to tell them is, look, I am in this interesting, unique position where I'm a developer who can fix the problems that I find as a user, because as a user, I need these things to work, and as a developer, I know why they're not working.
Yeah, I know what's the least that you can do, and that's make it work. I mean, yeah.
Right, exactly. So I can. That's actually a really interesting thing for me to use as I guess a pro for my disability, as it were. Because what I tend to do is not mention it until I have to, unless I see there's a big accessibility contribution that they want from a prospective candidate. In that case, it becomes
a strength,
an advantage
instead of a disability. Yeah. Yeah, because what do you do on a mod then? Because my experience is also that in a mod you have like sort of rooms, and often they are grouped in a sort of zone, and they have this text description like, hey, you're walking into this and this room and blah, blah, blah. And in theory, people read it. But also the descriptions are very visual. So do you create areas?
I don't create areas. That's usually what volunteers and storytellers, we call them storytellers. They're like the people who have room creation powers. They can like create new areas, and they can like script mobs to do certain things. Mobs are like computer controlled characters.
Yeah.
What I tend to do is I work on the mechanics. Like our game is a sci-fi game, so what I do is make sure that the space battles go well, that the combat is balanced, that we create new artifacts that people can buy, so like they can do new features in the game, new mini games.
I guess closer to the engine and not just sort of content creation for whatever.
Right. Yeah. Like I have a manager, and she manages all the things. She says what areas get created and what I need to do to make them come to life, as it were. But the game does have some interesting accessibility challenges, because what you find is there's an ASCII map, so you have to like make sure that isn't used in such a way that there's no textual alternative. Even in mods, this happens.
Even the text doesn't have a textual alternative. That's
sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
That's interesting, and sometimes it's just like the speed at which things move. Like sometimes things just go so fast that a screen reader can't keep up, especially if it's not at a very high speech rate. So then you have to figure out, do we need to balance this out for screen reader users? Do we have to shorten the text? Do we have to do something else to make this more doable? For example, there's like some quick time event-ish thing where some mob will start an attack and you have to interrupt them before they hit you. If you see that too late, there's no way you're going to be able to do that. So like at that point,
timing is part of the game.
Yeah, timing is part of the game. If you don't see it in time, you're essentially screwed. So then you have to like make the decision, is this going to be something that we have to fix server side, or is this something that client owners are going to have to make a trigger for, where it gives them a little blip that says, hey, you need to do your interrupt, because otherwise you're going to get hit. And often when it's like timing things like that, because there's latency, because there's lag, because there's like all sorts of factors, including how fast the screen reader is talking, it's usually easier for like someone who's really good at like mush client scripting or some other client to make that into an audible event where it like just blips at you, or it just uses a different TTS voice to tell you, hey, this is happening, do something.
Yeah, they can just like create a trigger for something.
Right.
Yeah, that's and do you think that there are people joining your mod because they know that you are developing it, or?
Not yet. Like I feel accessibility wise, we're not quite there yet to like advertise it en masse for the blind community. I do have a bit of leverage where that's concerned. People know who I am, what I do. So once I do feel we are there, I will probably announce it. Hey, look, we are really trying to make this accessible. We need feedback. You guys should come check it out.
Yeah, because it's like probably, perfect, you know. It's a non-visual game basically. I mean.
Yeah, essentially, It's actually a non-visual, slightly visual game, and we're trying to make the visual elements as accessible as possible.
Yeah.
And that can even be things like tables. Like some information is presented in tables, which looks great on the screen, but it's a bit annoying for screen readers. So in that sense, it's easier if you look. I'm working on that right now, actually, to take a table and just format it into a list for screen reader users. So they just have key value, not key value on one line with a bunch of spaces in between, which is really annoying to read.
Because can you do any sort of semantics through your?
No, it's all flat.
Yeah,
it's all plain text essentially. So you can't do that really. For visual players, you use the color for that, ANSI color.
Yeah.
Obviously, for screeners, we can't do that. So we'd have to.
Be creative.
What I usually do is I create commands to get a particular like statistic that you would normally have to like go down a list to find. Just instantly get it, like your HP. You just type HP, you get a number. That's your HP. You don't have to go into your score sheet and then go all the way up and then find your HP. That's going to take you way too long, especially in combat. So it's like HP, okay, 45, cool. I need to heal.
Yeah, so you can make it like...
You need like that first right there, boom, summary. Okay, I need to know what I'm doing. Because there is a prompt, usually, like a bar at the bottom of your screen where your vital statistics are displayed. And the problem with that is that you can't skip it. Screen readers are always going to read that out, and it's really spammy. If it has your health, your magic points, your movement points, everything. Like on a ship, you have like your speed, your shield power, your weapons.
Yeah,
that's a lot of spam that you can't.
If you're moving around, it will get repetitive, like 10 times a second, and you're not gonna listen.
So people turn it off. People turn off the prompt, but the prompt is there for a reason. Like it's there so you can keep track of those vitals. So if your prompt isn't there, you need some other way to do that. And then, like, one of the first accessibility fixes I made when I came on was a lot of these things you couldn't get any other way, and I've changed that. So now you can like type
shortcuts.
What is my location? You get like coordinates of your location.
It's basically like web accessibility, right? Like you want to be able to remove repetitive elements like navigation and skip it.
Yeah, essentially you're like reinventing semantics as well.
Yeah, isn't there like a new? Like I'm just coming up with things I never thought of before because I don't think about MUDs very often. Isn't there like a new MUD protocol based on XML or something that you could send like semantics of? Or is it still always Telnet?
It's all Telnet. There are things like GMCP, which are an MXP, which give you the ability to click on links, for example. Like you can say, if the person clicks this particular bit of text, this command should be used, and that works great if you can see a screen. Not so good if you're a screen reader user because you're in your command line when you're going to type things. You're not going to be able to quickly go to to a link. Except, like, actually, Nexus is a web-based player, so I do have thoughts of like what can we do to make that, like, if I make a landmark at the bottom of the screen that just has all the linkable things in it. That's for the rest invisible, but just for screen users.
Yeah, you could jump to the area.
For it. Yeah.
But that would actually be a Nexus-specific improvement then, yeah.
Right. At that point, like, I'd be improving. Like, obviously, they prefer people using Nexus because at that point they can control the experience and give the players the best, like how it was meant to be. So there's something to be said for that. And then if you use something else. Like there's a big Discord server with a bunch of people who like script for Mudlet, for Nexus, you can script for all these things to make it do things automatically or to trigger for things or to play sounds. So if we can get their client accessible, we can make the whole experience like very tailored to what the game is supposed to be about, which is cool.
Yeah, you can reach a lot more people than improving one game.
Right.
Yeah. That's
and actually the client is used for various games. So if we fix something for one game, it actually might actually very well happen that it's fixed for all the other games as well.
Too bad you have to go through Discord then.
Discord's not that bad.
Not that bad at the moment. The last time I tried it, I was kind of shocked and moved out of it quickly. But
over the last 9-10 months, it's actually been improving quite rapidly. They've added like proper keyboard navigation. There's a lot of things that work better. There's a bunch of labels have been added. It's actually quite usable now.
Okay, that's good. Okay. I'm glad to hear that. And are there any other games that you play? Because I'm also part of this group of Twitch streamers that try to play games even though they have disabilities. And it's really interesting what people come up with. And the whole topic of game accessibility, I find it really interesting. But
I play. I mean, there's a lot of audio games, which are essentially just games without video whatsoever. They're usually a little bit more amateuristic, a little bit less like expensive than you would find in like a AAA release. Obviously, it's usually just one dude from his basement who makes it. And there's some good. It's mostly arcade style stuff. You should shoot the thing that's in the center, or there's some RPGs. There's some like arcade stuff. There's some shooters. It's a bit of a dying community because there is no money in it, unfortunately, and we just all want mainstream games to work because they're a lot better. And where that's concerned, I play fighters mostly. I play Tekken, I play Mortal Kombat, I play Killer Instinct, Skullgirls, that kind of thing.
They can have good audio cues, right?
They have audio cues. Skullgirls actually went the extra mile and made menu narration with a screen reader possible. That was actually quite cool.
Nice.
It's more like an anime fighter kind of idea. And then I watch a lot of Let's Plays because a lot of games I want to play, I can't play. I think a lot of JRPGs. I enjoy JRPGs.
Yeah, they often have a lot of text, which is probably just pixels.
I mean, the text you could read with OCR, it's more like the walking around, the platforming, the just finding, taking one piece of one room and sticking it in some other place.
Yeah,
like the old Pokemon games have actually been made accessible. There's a guy who actually made a hex dump of the old Game Boy Color games, and I isolated the variables that held the text and just hooked them up to a screen reader. So if you have the right scripts, you can actually play Pokemon Crystal, and it just reads out the text for you, and you can use a Pathfinder function.
And you don't need the newest video card because who cares? It's an old game maybe, but the game is still the same without the visuals, of course.
Yeah, you don't need a video. It uses the internal memory to just even let you plot out a path. Okay, I'm standing here. I need to get to this house. How do I get there? And it'll tell you like 5 up, 3 left. It's pretty cool.
It might even be an enhanced experience above the visual one, I guess.
Yeah, essentially. It's like it has like you have a GPS in your game essentially all the time. You still don't know where to go, but you at least know how to get where you can go.
You know how to get nowhere. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, essentially.
Question from Mallory as well. Have you played Tau Station or Tau Station, a text-based space game?
Briefly, but I need to play with that more because I've seen that they've really done a lot of accessibility work. So I should give them another try. Maybe for experience for my own game.
Yeah, because you're building something.
Well, I'm working on this game, this MUD. Tau Station is a text-based web game. It's a sci-fi game. So, and the MUD I work on is also sci-fi based. So it's a good marriage, as it were.
Yeah, because you already said like you do audits, you do teaching. What do you do besides like your day job? It's a bit of a boring thing, maybe, but.
I do a lot with languages, and even there, accessibility comes up sometimes. Like I was working on figuring out a Japanese curriculum last year for people who are blind, and you need to figure out how the Japanese Braille works, how their input method works, how like transliteration to their like alphabet works, because it's not quite the same as you would think from like a sighted perspective. So then you have to figure out what guides can you use, what books actually work, things like that.
Can you use the hardware and the software that you usually use? Like
yes.
Okay.
Essentially, how it works is they have like 3 alphabets, 2 are syllabaries. One is like a whole bunch of like thousands of characters kind of deal, kind of like Chinese, and obviously Braille doesn't have enough dots to represent that, so they sort of dumb it down back to the other 2 syllabary alphabets, and those syllables look like letters that we know from Braille in regular Latin alphabet. So it's a bit of a brain bender where you're suddenly reading letters that you would not expect to find in that order because they mean something else. Like a fun anecdote I have about that.
Oh, you just dropped away in audio here. I hope you can still hear me. And that was Florian, I guess.
So that was pretty funny.
Oh, sorry. Do you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Your audio dropped for a few, so I
Oh
missed
no.
your explanation of the last thing that you said. I think was that you don't hear characters in an obvious order, and you were about to, to tell me an
Ah,
anecdote, and I was pretty
yeah.
excited to
Okay.
hear
Am
it.
I
But
am I am I back?
yeah,
All right. So when I first looked into this and I found this out, like I was learning these mind-bending, like different combinations of letters, and what happened was the letter for ha is U in Braille. Like so, the Japanese letter ha is the combination U in Braille, and the letter na is K. So put them together, you get hana or UK in Braille. And I found actually this out because I looked at this video from this person who made a video on learning Japanese called Hana, and she actually lived in England. So that was actually
oh,
hilarious. It was really like on point and coincidental that like her name
oh,
was
that's
UK
funny.
and she lived in the UK even though her name was Hana. So
But that's kind of weird. So the characters that you are used to are mapped to other characters. So
yeah, you have to context switch essentially, kind of like how Braille music works as well. Like
yeah,
in Braille music, you reuse letters as well, but it's far less, like far fewer letters at that point because there's only like 8 notes and there's like
yeah, keeps it easy.
45 characters. Like,
Music is so easy. Only 8 notes. No,
only 8 notes.
I'm not gonna touch that subject. Oh, but that's interesting. I mean, how that maps to each other. I can imagine indeed when you look at characters like a normal letter from the Latin alphabet just looks completely different than a Japanese letter, for example.
Yeah, it
But
would.
if they on a Braille rule, they have the same sort of
Yeah, they have the
they
same
shape.
context to work with, as it were. Yeah, they have
Yeah,
the same amount of dots. Like they have tried a system where like the kanji, the Chinese characters are more like they just use like multiple cells to represent one kanji, but that just never really took off. Nobody's using it. It exists, but nobody's using it. It's kind of like a grade 2 in Braille in the Netherlands, which is unfortunately not in use either, and I miss it. I want
so
it back.
promote it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
in theory, you could feel a word that means something in Dutch or English, and then it would be in Japanese. It would use different letters and mean something else.
Yeah, could
A
happen
bit like the UK
if you
example.
have like if you run into the coincidence that like like an arbitrary order of letters makes a Dutch or an English word and it also means something in Japanese, then yeah, that could totally happen.
Yeah, I find the most silly things funny, so I would probably be laughing behind my Braille rule, and everybody would be looking at me like, what's this about? And I just find it funny because it means the same. Mallory also says, I hope at some point Florian talks about math. You have something with math? I
Math
mean,
and I are
we've talked letters, we've talked music, but numbers.
music. Now we have to talk about math. Math is an interesting one. Math is inherently spatial, like because you have like stuff below the line, stuff above the line, and that's just not a thing that Braille readers are used to. So there's a big disconnect between what like let's call them conventional teachers will try to teach you and like what Braille users are actually seeing, and it's never really been solved yet. Like there is LaTeX, which you can use to represent Braille. There's Nemeth. There is the math player that you can use to like look at a Braille, like look at an equation more visually, but like in a screen reader sense. So it'll say you can look at the individual units of an equation, but math and Braille, it's a tough one. It's there's a lot of there's a lot of characters that people don't normally learn, like the Greek letters. You need to learn in Braille, and they need to
Yeah.
be like represented somehow. And then there's like uh, the whole you can only see one line at a time problem that you have, especially on computer Braille, where you have like a big equation that you're trying to solve, and then you have to go solve one part of it, and you have to scroll back up to see what was the other part of the equation again. So you essentially would be better if you could look at
It's hard to form connections when you don't have the overview, right?
right, you don't have the overview. You only have one line at a time, and this also happens a bit with coding. But coding is a bit more like divided in the sense that you can, okay, well, this is still the function that I'm working on. This is not. I don't have to go look at like what other function this connects to right this minute. I can first finish what I'm doing and then go back. in math, it's a bit more like the feedback loop is way shorter. So you have to be like, okay, I've done x to the second now. We've done that bit. What was the next bit again? They have to scroll back up. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
+2. So I have to do -2. All right, -2. Now what? And then just that gets really tiring after a while.
It's a lot of back and forth and counterintuitive. It's like
it's
you're
tricky.
busy
Like,
with the stuff that's not interesting, navigating it.
yeah, you have to scroll up and down and up and down. That's what I was doing when I was a kid. Because obviously, when I was doing this in high school, I didn't have anyone who really knew very well how to do this. Only when I started my 4th or 5th year in high school is when I got a person who started giving me remedial mathematics, and she knew like the Braille notations, and she knew some of the tools, but some of the tools are extremely old. Like Braille, we call them Braille students. Like people who are blind and do math in high school over here in the Netherlands are often told to use a calculator app called ElderCalc, which is literally, I think, a tool from the 90s. It's a command line with like a handful of like mathematical functions you can make it do, and like no manual on how they actually properly work. So
Yes.
you come in as a blind student with that program that you don't understand, and then you have to make a teacher who doesn't understand how you need to be taught how to use your program.
So you're not teaching
it's a
math,
mess. It's
you're
really
teaching the
is
program.
a mess. Like my mathematics education was very subpar for that reason. It was just so much juggling of an old tool, of Excel sheets with a bunch of formulas that nobody really understood, and then just a whole bunch of like bad.
You weren't learning the math, but you were learning tools, right?
I was learning tools. I was learning tricks, not the actual mathematics. I still don't understand math very well. I want to. I intend to go through the OpenStax books. I think they use either LaTeX or they use Math Player for their stuff. So it should let me redo my mathematics and do it in the way that I can actually figure out how that works. I actually have a person now who's really good at this stuff who I can ask, who's also blind. So I didn't have that resource when I first started, which is a shame. Cause
I also still have this goal, like this dream goal, which I'll probably never do, to go through high school math again, just to understand it. Because somehow I got my diploma, but I just forgot it all, and it never really worked. But that's one of those side projects that are never gonna turn into a main project, I think.
That's me with a lot of like high school subjects. Like a lot of things I don't like. Economics, history, okay, I got through that pretty all right. But things like mathematics, even languages, I didn't know I liked languages when I was learning languages in high school, and it's a shame because I didn't do as much as my best as I could have. And I find that a shame now, because like I could have been much better at German and French than I am now.
Yeah, I just do English and I stick to that, and that's I guess I have to get used to that. I actually spent half a year in Switzerland in the French part. Didn't help, like nothing at all. That doesn't improve my French in any way. No.
If you immerse and you can get away with like not using English, if you're in a part of the country where they just don't speak English, then you're gonna have to. But if you could still get away with using English, you're gonna use English.
You're gonna fall back on it. Speaking from experience, you will. So let's say with your experience from learning math the wrong way and teaching people to use their tools as well, but for programming. You meet somebody, let's say 10, 12-year-olds, a 12-year-old, and they maybe they just got to know learning a Braille rule, or maybe just started out with screen readers. Where do you send people like the first time that you meet them? Like where should they read up? Or
I tend to not teach people that young, but if I were
pick a
to
different
be
age.
teaching a child, I would essentially you can't really send them off on their own. There is no resource that just takes them from 0 to hero without supervision, because there's so many concepts that come at you. There's like different cursors, there's different like modes for your screen reader, there's add-ons, there's like programs that work a certain way. Only if you do this magic incantation, dance around the tree for 5 times before you can make it work. There's so much you need to know. So
you remind me of my mud days again. That's good. It was all magic. But
just a lot of I probably would just sit them down and I would like explain, okay, this is how you tap through things, and then if that doesn't work, you can try this other thing. And then I just give them a lot of chances to just ask questions. Do you get this? Does this make sense to you? Why not?
So it's a lot about experience, I guess. I'm passing on the experience.
Yeah, it really is. Like screen readers, you can teach from a manual, and even if like NVIDIA has a pretty good manual. You can learn how screen reader works, but that's like learning how an IDE works. It's cool if you know how to run a project in Visual Studio. You still know how to program.
Yeah. Sounds like an enormous amount of like mental overload, I guess. You have to do so much.
It's mental gymnastics. Like I learned by essentially breaking things and then fixing them again.
Yeah. At least you
Like
you can fix them again.
I remember the first day I had my computer that I was going to use in my mainstream high school, mainstream primary school. I was like 10, 11. I was messing around and suddenly I lost all my audio. I'm like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah.
Like, you're 10 years old, you're worried you're going to get in trouble because you broke the laptop
you
on the
touch
first
something.
day. It's
yeah.
Like, oh no.
But then you
learn
learn
that I muted it. It's like, okay, well, that's what that does. Good to know.
Oh no, the most terrible thing I could ever do. You muted it. Yeah. So it's like the equivalent of a cable being loose.
Yeah, but like for a 10-year-old kid who is like dependent on that working, it's actually frightening. It's panic inducing. It's like, oh shit, this really expensive gear that I just got, I just broke it without meaning to. Is this gonna happen again? Can I fix it? What happened? Oh no.
Did you actually break it? You don't even know.
Existential crisis you're going through every time it happens.
And you're so dependent, right? It's not like you had another option that you say, oh, this doesn't work. Let me just fix it.
I'll just turn this off now.
Try something else. No.
Try something else, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to be thinking about mods the next few days, I guess. And game accessibility. I think it's a really interesting topic. I wish I had the time and energy to dive into it, because I think there's so many... I studied industrial design.
Yeah.
And after... Do you need to jump away or?
Soon. But
okay.
Finish your story.
Yeah. I used to study industrial design, and that didn't work out, so I went to study photography afterwards. Mm-hmm. And that worked out, well, not perfectly either, but better than industrial design. And even during the study the industrial design, I did some level design for the Unreal Engine.
Oh, yeah.
And I really consider doing something with game design, because it's just such a wide open field, and there is so much room for creativity. And I can imagine if you're
this is why I like it. Like I do a lot of, like I said, I do a lot with language. I do a lot of audio editing. I do some composing as well. It's just a lot of ways to like let your creativity out. Just work at a problem or work at a piece or like a jingle or whatever you're working on to get it as close as it comes to like the thing you have in your head, and that's just really freeing and fun.
And there are so many ways to create something that's fun and challenging that I hope people step up and say, hey, I want to make fun games and challenge people in a non-visual way, because...
That would be good.
Yeah, you can find so many ways.
The Last of Us Part 2 is a PlayStation 4 game that came out last year.
Yeah,
and
famous for many accessibility stuff in there.
Yeah, they added accessibility for like pretty much any disability you can think of. And they were listening to feedback too. Like if something doesn't work, they're like, okay, well, we'll need to touch that up then. And then they actually will.
Yeah.
Which is...
See it like a challenge and not like an issue.
And it's incredibly sad that that's an unheard of thing until now. It's just not something we've seen before. And it's, yeah. After like 40 years of games, that's like the first time that's ever happened, which is sad. And
do you have like a group of friends or something that say like, hey, Florian, I should try this game, or we heard this one is good, or...
There is a place called the audiogames.net forum. That's where that happens. There's like some blind Let's Players as well who will audit games, put them on YouTube.
Yeah,
people can watch it, see if they like it, and then buy it as well. So that's usually how that works.
So that's like your source of information for those kind of...
Essentially, yeah. I'll look in there now and again. It's like, hey, is there something new? Oh, this person made a copy of a shooter. I'm not interested. Okay.
Is that all? Okay, next. I'll just continue building my own stuff. Yeah.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, that's like, if you've got the tools and nobody's going to help you, then you're just going to build your own, right?
Yeah. It's the only way to do it.
Okay. Well, I've learned a lot. Yeah, as I said, this is gonna stay in my mind, and I don't know in which ways yet, but we've got some people chatting, and if there are any more questions, this would be the time to ask, because otherwise I think we can enjoy the rest of our evening.
Yep, I just got violently hollered down to get some food, so...
Oh, you didn't eat much yet?
No, yeah.
No, you should fix that. Well, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm guessing that people already know you. That's gonna be it, right?
Well, you can find me on Twitter if any other questions come up.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can put me in the chat, my Twitter.
Yeah.
And
I really enjoyed talking to you. Yeah, you might not notice, but I am really like taking in what you said, and this is gonna stick with me. It's just so interesting to get a different viewpoint because I, I'm at the point now that I can describe myself as an accessibility expert, but it's always about the actual user experience and how things go. And I'm not like an accessibility coding expert or a gaming expert. Or the whole fun of accessibility is that there are so many views and so many things that you can try, and everybody
different
that's in the field has different
disciplines and
experience.
angles. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So thanks a lot. So also from the chat, nice to have met you, Florian, even if it is digital. Yeah, well, that's the default mode that we have these days, so that keeps it easy.
Yeah.
If you can handle a computer,
I
you
even
can do
have
most
my
things.
cook corona going on here, though.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks very much. I'm gonna stop our stream right there, and good night, everybody. Bye bye, and thanks for joining.